Is our very popular session about the peanut ball and other labor delivery methods, presented by none other than Bethany Sanders, CNM. That's a certified nurse midwife under Vanderbilt Health. She's been serving our community with her birthing expertise for years. Please welcome Bethany to the main stage. Yay, Bethany.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us and hanging out with us. This session, we're going to be kind of chatting about mobility in labor, maternal positioning, and tools that we use for that, including the peanut ball and different things like that. This is something that I'm super excited about, and I could talk for way more than 30 minutes. So I do want to give you some resources. If you want to know more, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, send me a message, or put something in the chat. But a lot of this information can also be found on Spinning Babies, which is a website that's really popular, that has some awesome stuff about maternal positioning and things to optimize how baby is in the pelvis even prior to birth, and also some suggestions troubleshooting for babies who are maybe in a less than ideal, including babies who are breech or kind of turned in a way that has a bigger diameter for them to try to fit through the pelvis. My other favorite, the only books that I carry in my birth bag is by Penny Simkin. It's a book called The Birth Partner. It is a fantastic resource, and it is chock full of great stuff about maternal positioning. And it includes for women with epidurals. The days of women getting super heavy epidurals where they're totally numb, can't feel their legs, and just kind of lay there and let labor happen to them. That's really kind of a thing that we've left in the past, thankfully. And so even in women, no matter what they choose for pain relief, there are still some awesome ways that we can help facilitate and take advantage of the physiology, the way that our body is shaped, the way that babies are designed to pass through, and even reduce the risk for cesarean birth and other interventions that can sometimes happen. So those are kind of my two favorites, the Spinning Babies, the Birth Partner. My dear friend Heidi Duncan is over in a booth as well. She is actually the peanut birth guru in Nashville. So if you do have questions or concerns, please stop by and visit her. A lot of our doulas, we have an amazing birth community here. We're so lucky. They also have expertise in this maternal positioning. And our nurses here at Vanderbilt have also undergone training. So it's really exciting to see that we're all kind of coming together to realize how important what we do during labor can be to get to those outcomes. So what we're going to be chatting about today is the different stages of labor and what we can do during those stages to really optimize that birth experience, and then give you kind of some different tips and tricks and suggestions and things like that. So jumping right in. Some women will experience what we call prodromal labor, which is a really big bummer. So the medical definition of labor is regular uterine contractions that are leading to cervical change. A small percentage of women, unfortunately, they kind of get stuck in this holding pattern where they're having regular contractions. They're uncomfortable, but they're not seeing that. We're not seeing the cervical change. So they're not really ready to be here with us at the hospital or be admitted to the birth center or have the midwife there at home, but they're uncomfortable. And so there's some things that we can do during that time. The first thing is rest. If you're one of these unlucky women that kind of gets into that pattern, we strongly want you to just try to conserve some of that energy, knowing that you still have a little ways to go. The second thing is we think that maybe this could be caused by a baby that's a little bit malpositioned. Our pelvises are made up of several bones. Those bones are designed to kind of shift and change position a little bit, particularly with the hormones in pregnancy. You combine that with babies' heads, which are also made of several bones that are designed to kind of shift and change position as well. So by changing the shape of the maternal pelvis, we can maybe change the position of baby. So one of the things that we really love is something called the Miles Circuit. And it's a series of 3 positions that you want to do for about 30 minutes each. The other great thing about this is that if baby is optimally positioned, doing this will not have adverse effects. So it's kind of a good go-to no matter what. So what it consists of is what we usually will do first is to try to kind of pull the baby out of the pelvis. And so in order to do that, we want to get in positions where, if possible, your shoulders are going to be lower than your hips. The easiest way to do that is kind of like on all fours and then drop down and just kind of rest there. You want your hips to be about shoulder width apart or so. And again, we're going to kind of use gravity then to pull baby out of the pelvis for about 30 minutes. Then we'll follow that up by doing 30 minutes of laying on your side with that top leg almost like really like all the way over as far as you can get. It'll almost feel like you're almost laying on your stomach. And you can use pillows and things, of course, to make that more comfortable. The idea with that is to, again, open up that pelvis and get that baby just to turn their head a little bit. And after 30 minutes or so, then we do what's called we want to be upright. We want to kind of get that kiddo back down, kind of, if they're in the best position, we want to kind of cram them back down in the pelvis. So the way that we like to do that is oftentimes by either sitting on a birth ball or some kind of like type of a squat. A birth ball is really can just be a fancy name for an exercise ball. I mean, you can pick these up, Walmart, Target, just anywhere. You do want to pay attention to the size though. If you are blessed to be like 5'8" or taller, you probably want to get a little bit bigger diameter ball to be more comfortable. I think the average is like 65 centimeters or so. So definitely check on the package. And if you're like 5'4", or have short legs, or a little below, you may want to consider getting a little bit smaller ball. A lot of the hospitals locally have these. With COVID, some people are preferring to bring their own in, which is absolutely fine. No one's going to give you the evil eye if you show up, for admission to either a birth center or the hospital, with your own ball in hand. It's not a big deal. So that can be one thing that can be good for prodromal labor. The other thing is that sometimes this is a good time to do some asymmetrical things. So again, if we think about the pelvis and how it's shaped, sometimes if we create some asymmetry, if baby is a little bit, well, we call it in medical terms, we call it baby being asynclitic. Back in rural Georgia, which is where I was prior to coming here to Vanderbilt, we used to call it the baby being cattywampus. So ideally, the smallest diameter is when babies' chins are tucked and they're kind of straight on. Some babies, though, they kind of have their head tilted one way or the other, and that creates a bigger diameter. So that's going to be harder for that baby to come through that pelvis and the birth canal. So doing asymmetrical positions can sometimes get them to wiggle them out a little bit. So the things like that, and we're big fans of what we call curb walking. So that is walking on the curb with 1 foot up and 1 foot down, and then kind of turn around and do it the other way. A lot of the tricks with asymmetrical positioning is that you want to do both sides. And that's also going to help to relax that pelvic floor and create some of that space. You don't just want to do it on one side. The other way to do that, especially if you're at home, is to go up and down the stairs sideways, but always, always holding on to a railing, and preferably even have somebody just to kind of spot you. Since in late pregnancy, our center of gravity is different, and that can throw our balance off a little bit. We certainly don't want to create any accidents. So same thing, kind of going up the stairs with, 1 foot on one step, 1 foot on the other step, and just kind of walking your way up. And then you can kind of turn around and go back down and then switch sides. But those are good things, just again, to try to kind of optimize positioning for baby. So hopefully, if you were unlucky enough to be in the prodromal stage, this has kind of kicked you over into what we call first stage of labor. So first stage of labor is the early stuff. And this is the part of labor that tends to be the most variable in length. It tends to be longer in first-time mamas than in those that have had births before. And it's the time when oftentimes we'll say, gosh, this is when women are excited, right? The adrenaline's going, it's getting time to go. But this is also the time where we want you to really kind of hang tight if you can. There's good research that shows that being admitted to the hospital too soon in early labor can actually increase the risk for interventions and cesarean birth. So assuming that you're low risk, you can check in with your provider and say, like, hey, I'm having some contractions. I'm really excited. This is what's going on. They can give you some guidance about when it's time to, to think about heading in. But a lot of times at this stage, we're like, great, you're having, 10, 15 minutes contractions. Rest again if you can, because this still may take a little while. Make sure that you're hydrating. That's another big thing. Sometimes, your body it needs the fuel. You're about to run a marathon, and the uterus is a muscle. It works better if it's well fed and it's well hydrated. So small, light meals, totally fine. Some women in labor do experience nausea, so I wouldn't eat anything that you'd be too disappointed if it came up later. But a lot of times women they just kind of want like soups, carby stuff, some fruit, that type of thing. Most people aren't having like a steak dinner or something super heavy at this point. So my other best advice that I give families is in early labor, you kind of want to ignore these contractions until they demand your attention. There's a difference between the ones where the contractions where you're like, okay, I'm having to breathe a little bit, but I'm okay. I don't really want to talk through them, but I could if I had to. I can answer questions. I'm responsive to it. There's maybe we think of the contraction kind of like a wave. There's maybe like 10, 15 seconds at the peak of it that I'm kind of in my own zone. But as it's building up, as it's coming down, I'm okay. That changes as labor progresses. And so sometimes the behavioral cues are a little bit better indicator of what stage of labor mom's in than just the timing of the contractions alone. So we had a mom not too long ago. She was a baker, and she said, I'm going to know it's active labor. I'm going to know I'm not in early labor anymore when I start burning the cookies. Because her plan was, when she went into labor, was to start baking cookies. And I loved that, because I think that really kind of captures that idea of like when you have to concentrate on what you're doing, when it's taking that energy and that focus, that's how you know that things are progressing. So we used to say too that, if you can't walk, talk, or chew gum through contractions, that's going to be another way of kind of knowing where you're at. And again, when to kind of think about heading in. In early labor, we also, again, want to kind of think about opening up the pelvises. Most babies enter labor kind of with their heads turned so that they're looking towards your hip. They're looking towards the side. And part of what they're doing in early labor as they descend through the pelvis is they're then turning. So hopefully they're going to be looking down, because that's the smallest way. That's the easiest way to push out a baby. So this is a great time to, go for a slow walk. We're big fans of dance, kind of like partner dancing. This is a great time to pull out your 8th grade dance moves, kind of slow dance, rocking your hips, just kind of moving around, seeing what feels good. And then giving that feedback to the people that are there to support you in birth, whether that's your partner, your doula, family members, friends, whoever's, kind of part of your birth team and with you. But again, we want to think about open hips and pelvis. This is not a great time to be laying flat on your back because just the way that our pelvises are shaped, that actually kind of gives babies an uphill climb to make as opposed to being able to kind of come straight down. This is, some women will sit rocking chairs. This is not the time to sit ladylike. You're really going to want those hips wide apart, just creating as much space as possible. Some women will find, I am old enough to have watched enough Saved by the Bell. I used to call it the AC Slater, but I realized recently that not everyone knew what I was talking about. If you take a chair that has no arms, flip it around backwards, sit on the chair, and then lean on the back, that can be a great way so that you're not expending a lot of energy, but you're in an open, wide position. The birth ball is also a great option for this. You can stand and lean over it over the bed. You can kneel and lean over it. You can be on all fours and supported by that. Lots of different options that you can do. Some women will have loose stool during labor or will feel like they need to use the restroom constantly. The commode is absolutely fine to labor. You can take some pillows in there with you and either sit backwards, same thing, put pillows and kind of rest on the sort of like the tank above it, or put pillows behind you and sit and just kind of, and kind of relax. But essentially anything that's using that type of deep seated position is really a squat. And when we squat, our pelvises can open up to an entire centimeter. That doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're talking about a baby's head, and we've all seen newborns' head, a centimeter is a lot. So again, we just want to create as much space as we can. Shower is fabulous. A lot of women find that hot water to be really relaxing and helpful. In general, I recommend waiting on baths, like full water submersion, until a little bit later in labor. But showers can be a great way, especially if women are having back pain, to kind of aim the hot water right there. It can be relaxing. So definitely a good option for that. And then for women who are, especially if it's the middle of the night, they need some rest. This is also a great time to introduce the peanut ball. So peanut ball is kind of shaped like Mr. Peanut. These are available pretty readily and they're not super expensive. You can kind of tell this one's properly inflated because it's got a little bit of wiggle room, but it's not super firm. So one of the things that we love to do with this is when women are laying on their side to put this between their legs. And this is wider than what you can typically get with pillows. But again, it's creating that really open pelvis, but allowing women to rest and conserve their energy. So a lot of times what I'll say for this stage, this early labor stage, is balance your periods of rest with something a little bit more active and just kind of keep moving around, see what feels best. As you move into that active labor stage, and that typically roughly correlates with maybe 5-6 centimeters of dilation, and then up until the cervix is fully dilated. So that's what we call the active labor. So as you move into active labor, women tend to become a little bit more restless. And so we encourage position changes maybe every 30 minutes, 60 minutes max, just to kind of keep moving around, keep seeing what feels good, what feels right. This is where that, submersion in the tub can be a great option. And in the tub, there's lots of options. It doesn't have to be just kind of seated. Some women will be on all fours in the tub. Some women are leaning back. Some women are, are laying on their side. So again, in settings where the larger tubs are available, like birth centers and some of our local hospitals. When that's available, that's a great option. At home, you can recreate that. I know when I was in labor with my daughter, my bathtub was not quite as large as I would have liked it to be, but getting your belly under the water, that's where a lot of that relief tends to come. So even if you can't get, super, super deep, even in a forward leaning position where that belly is warm and wet, that's a good one. You can also take like warm, moist washcloths on that too and put them on the back. A lot of women will find that to be helpful as well. I mentioned forward-leaning positions. So in the event that instead of when babies rotate from looking to the hips, looking to the side, if they, instead of rotating down, they took a turn and went north, and now babies are looking up, or what we call sunny side up. And that tends to be associated with a little bit more back pain in labor. Having said that, most women do experience some amount of back pain. So forward-leaning positions may take advantage of the fact that the spine in the back of babies is the heaviest part and try to use that gravity to pull baby back around and get them to rotate in turn. So anything where you're forward-leaning can help and to take advantage of that. That also gives great access for people to apply counter pressure or kind of to literally push against the sacrum. So the sacrum is kind of like a diamond shaped, forgive my geometry, a part of the pelvis that's right, you feel on the sides, those bony parts, if you kind of go wrap around right there in the center, in the back, in the middle. And so sometimes having somebody to apply counter pressure there can also help women to cope and feel better during the contractions when they feel things kind of, feels like things are trying to open. Some women will also find that on the sides, those bumps, those on the top, what we call the iliac crest, sometimes having somebody apply pressure from the side can actually, if you think about the pelvis sort of being like this, if you push on the top, it can actually open the bottom a little bit. So that's another option that some women will find to become, will prefer or want us to do during active labor. This is also a great time. Miles circuit can also be used here as well if we're suspecting that baby needs to be repositioned a bit. This is also a great time for something that's called the sideline hip release. And there are fantastic pictures on that Spinning Baby site kind of walking through how to do that. This is something that women absolutely must have assistance to do so. I usually recommend 2 people. One person is actually physically touching the mom, and then one person just to kind of be the safety spotter. So with this, what we want to do is, if we think about the bottom of the pelvic muscles are sort of like a sling. So if we want to release those muscles, what we really need to get a deep stretch. So we can take advantage of gravity to do so. So if mom lays on her side and kind of scoots so that her belly is almost dangling off the side of the bed, and a lot of this is where the safety part comes in. So that hip is kind of right against the side, takes that top leg and it literally dangles off. That gravity is going to pull and really stretch that pelvic muscle and create as much space as possible. This also works fantastic for those cattywampus babies. So it really stretches that. What you need, though, is somebody to physically hold the hip and make sure that the hips are still stacked nice and neat on top of each other, even though that leg is coming over. And I apologize, I don't have space and room in here to really demonstrate. But again, there's awesome resources for this. And this is definitely something that, doulas are trained and are great with. And again, our nursing staff here has also been trained in doing this. But same thing, because there's that asymmetry, we also would reverse and then do it on the other side after a few moments. And then a lot of times, particularly as active labor progresses, women start to feel some pressure. They may find squatting to actually be comfortable. Active labor is also the ideal time for women who choose to get an epidural. Hopefully they've made it through that early labor part, and this is the time that they're getting that. So we can modify a lot of these positions for epidural. So for example, instead of squatting, which is something that really requires that leg strength, these labor and birth beds do all kinds of crazy things. So we can actually elevate the head of the bed, drop the foot, and almost like, we call it throne position. Almost looks like mom is sitting in a throne, like the queen that she is. And that's going to emulate that squat by getting those legs and those hips nice and wide apart. The same thing where sideline hip release can be done with the epidural. Again, this is where the peanut ball, that is the peanut ball's time to shine, is for moms with epidurals, that they can be assisted and helped into using this. And that's also where that frequent position changes, every 30 to 60 minutes, kind of want to keep moving around, keep trying different things. Sometimes labor is just throwing enough stuff on the wall and seeing what sticks. But anything that's going to help and facilitate to have, potentially a faster birth and make your birth maybe a little easier for both you and baby, that's a plus. That's a win for us as far as I'm concerned. So I'm looking to see in my notes if there was anything. This is also a great time to use your partner, whether that's having them, if women are squatting, they can use their partner, kind of hold onto the partner for support. Hospitals often we have these crazy contraptions called a birth or a squat bar. So on the bed, it's this kind of this metal bar that hooks onto the bed, and women can either dangle off of it. We can throw a towel or a sheet over it and they can just kind of pull and just dangle. They can lean on it. They can grab a hold and kind of, you can't swing from it, unfortunately, but almost, and get into that deep squat. Again, there's a lot of creativity the biggest thing is this: you do not want to be on your back. And that a lot of times women will find that when they do need to be on their back, whether that's for having their cervix checked, or medically there's something going on, or if in transition to from one position to the other, they're on their back, they may even notice that it's more intense, that they feel more back pain with that. So again, that's kind of your body's way of being like, this isn't really ideal for creating that space and helping that baby come through. The tail end of active labor is what we call transition. So transition is the most intense part of labor, but it also tends to be fairly short. Transition is kind of the time where I say to women, it's just sort of what stinks the least. It's intense. So it's just kind of hanging in there. This is often the stage where moms they're not talking anymore. They're really intent and focused. Some women get a little crabby, and that's okay. Nothing that you say in labor can be held against you. It's sort of just that, sometimes it's that vocalization of the intensity and what you're feeling. And so some women are vocal, some women moan, some women, make different kinds of grunts and different sounds like that. Totally fine. Again, anything that helps women to cope and find what works for them. But we do always encourage vocalizations to stay low, like a lower pitch, lower tone, because anything that's too high can sometimes be you're tightening up. And again, we want it loose and open is where we're headed for in this stage. Some women will have a brief stage that's called the rest and be grateful. So they've done all this hard work. They're right at the end. They're maybe 9-10 centimeters dilated. Some women will actually notice that their contractions may start to space. Sometimes we'll see it on the monitors here in the hospital that things just kind of space out a little bit. It's like, what's going on? We were just rolling and now we're pausing. Sometimes this is your body's way of saying, take a rest, be grateful for this rest, because that hardest, that pushing part is coming, that's going to exert the most amount of energy and is the most stressful for mom and baby. So if you're lucky enough to get that is totally normal. Take advantage of it. You're almost there. But that's that very tail end of that transition leading into second stage. So second stage of labor is from 10 centimeters of dilation until the baby is born. So that, again, super variable in length. Tends to be longer, though, in moms with epidurals, in moms with their first baby, or if babies, if despite all of these positions and things that we've done, if baby is still a little bit malpositioned, again, a little bit bigger diameter may sometimes take just a little bit longer. So second stage is, again, we want to keep trying, but we really want moms in the position that feels the most effective for them. And again, even though most of the birth images that we see in the media and in books and things like that are women on their back with their legs pulled way back, that's not necessarily the best. And we know that. But we also know 68% of women in one survey in the US push and birth on their back. That's really not the ideal. 23% of women will push in more of like a semi-sitting. So that's a little bit better. But again, we want to encourage women to see what works for them and be open to trying different things. It's also possible for some women to push in a position, and then maybe that's a position that they're not so comfortable birthing in. But if it's working for pushing, we can kind of flip at the last minute. And that goes for things like the commode. Sometimes that's a place that we're comfortable with pushing. We're telling women, push like you're having a bowel movement. If we want to take advantage of that, sometimes that's a place where women, just feels natural to be. If that's the case, women are like, a lot of them are like, I do not want to give birth in the bathroom. Totally fine. You can push like that. And as we start to see baby, we can flip to something else. And you'd be amazed at women, even sometimes as they're crowning, as that head is almost born, they are absolutely able to switch and get into a different position. Or even sometimes they'll make a mad dash across the room real quick to get in a way that they feel safe, that they feel empowered to birth in. So we can take advantage of something called the birth stool. This is something that the one that we have here, it kind of looks like a plastic C. It's a deep supported squat. This is a fantastic way for women who maybe their legs are a little bit tired. So this, they're not having to expend as much energy to get into that deep squat. I usually encourage the partners to sit behind them. That way in between they can rest and they're supported so that all of their energy is really being focused into that pushing effort. But that's a great position for pushing. May not be as great for birth. There's some research that says it may increase the risk of tearing. So sometimes, again, that's one that we'll use, but then transition to something else. That can be, we can kind of get similar to that again with using the beds and doing these positions. Side lying is absolutely an option for pushing, and that also works great in women who are tired. They've done all the things. Maybe they need a little bit of a rest. Same thing. We can kind of do a squat, but just kind of rotate it like it's on the side. And we have peanut balls in different sizes that sometimes we can use too to help support that top leg so the pelvis is staying nice and open, but mom's not having to hold her leg and use even more energy during that stage. My all-time favorite is probably for women who are birthing in the bed, and we do it quite a bit with women with epidurals. It's kind of like a modified hands and knees. So we put the head of the bed up, and that allows moms to rest on it and really be fully supported in a way that all of their weight is being supported so that they're safe, but they're able to be upright and take advantage of gravity, as well as putting their hips in that nice wide position. This is fantastic both for women with epidurals and women without. Some women will go from that into the full, like a full hands and knees, but that's going to have you, that's going to have you expending a little bit more energy in terms of with your arms. Asymmetrical pushing is also an option. Again, using the peanut ball, we call it kind of the fire hydrant. If you think of like a dog with the one leg up, that's kind of what we're going to, we can do that type of thing and using the ball as well. But partner supported. I mean, I've had women do all kinds of things, but this is another great opportunity to pull that partner in and have them physically supporting, as well as that close contact. That helps release those endorphins, and that helps release oxytocin, the love hormone, which also happens to be the hormone that causes contractions. So we can kind of double dip a little bit and utilize that as well. But again, whatever works the best is ultimately the best position here. You'll notice I didn't say anything about being flat on the back, using the stirrups. I'm not opposed to it if that's what works the best, but usually that's kind of a last resort. Traditionally, that's the position that was used because it was the most convenient for us, the healthcare providers, to be able to see what's going on and have access. Moms can birth in any position as long as we can safely, catch the baby and get where we need to be. It does not matter. I mean, I've been 38 weeks pregnant laying on the floor to catch a baby before. It is totally doable because it's really not about us as long as we can safely do it. It's really what's most effective, again, for moms. And then third stage is everything from when the baby's out to when the placenta comes out. Thankfully, this is a stage where most of the time you are just loving on that sweet little baby right there on your chest. Does not require much from mom at all. Occasionally, we may have moms stand up to squat to use gravity to help to kind of expel that placenta. But again, you've done all the hard work. This is your time just to enjoy that sweet reward of that baby. So again, I know that's a lot of information. That's a lot of talking. I really appreciate y'all coming out and listening to this. I am absolutely happy to answer questions. If you feel free to email me, which I think you can through the platform. You can also send me a message. Those resources that I mentioned earlier are a fantastic way of getting information, as well as some pictures and things like that. And again, we've got such an amazing birth community here in Nashville that you should be, we are happy to get you connected in to those people as well. So again, thanks y'all for coming. Happy birthing, and let us know if there's anything we can answer for you.